boy, is it hard to be a kind person or a generous person or a sweet, loving, Christian-y person when you're hurting. It is so hard to be the kind of person that is going to be generous at maybe a time of year when you're expected to be generous, and instead you're hurting because somebody has wronged you. You and I are only human, right? And at the end of the day, when people hurt us, it doesn't just affect that relationship, does it? It affects everyone around us. It affects who we are in every room we walk into. If we're hurting, if we're wounded, if we have been let down, betrayed by somebody we love or cared about, it creates a hurt in us that we carry with us everywhere. I mean, we've been talking about being generous. And the thing is, to be generous when there's a great need in front of us, when there's a noble cause we get to represent, or the people receiving it are just going to be instantly blessed and there'll probably be a beautiful hashtag and an Instagram photo about it. That is, in the end, easy to do. But what if you and I are supposed to be generous to an enemy? What if the opportunity in front of us is that we have to go do something loving and kind and giving to somebody that we feel tension with? It's worse than tension. They've hurt us. They've let us down. I'm not just talking about you got in a fight with your spouse and you're going to come home later and eventually you'll hash it out again and talk it over and you'll make up. But I'm talking about that person where seeing them just puts knots in your belly. Just running into them in public is an awkward moment. Is a moment where you don't feel comfortable, you want to leave, you might just go to a different store. It's not easy being generous to an enemy. And that's what's amazing about the scriptures. This book we call the Bible, the Jewish scriptures specifically, start in this book called Genesis. And Genesis begins with a garden and creation, all these crazy stories, but it ends with a profound message. The end of the book of Genesis, the first book of the Bible, of the Jewish scriptures, ends with a man by the name of Joseph. And Joseph, man, there's nobody who's been more hurt and let down by his loved ones than he. He was handed over, betrayed, sold to slavery, mistreated, and they just hated him. And he didn't really deserve it, honestly. I mean, yeah, he was a knucklehead, but he did not deserve the treatment and the imprisonment and the pain and the loss and losing his family like he had to go through. And Joseph, later in life, became very powerful, very wealthy. And at one moment, when a famine struck the land, all of his brothers who betrayed him came and begged in Egypt, where Joseph was living and was a man in power. He's second in command in Egypt. And in Egypt, as he ruled and had all this authority, you have his brothers begging him for help. They need money. They need food. They need to know that their family is going to be safe. And they don't know that the man in charge that they're speaking to is their long-lost, abandoned, betrayed brother, Joseph. They haven't seen him in years, and so they don't recognize him at all, especially with all the power that he's like wearing, an Egyptian pharaoh-like power. And so Joseph has this opportunity to repay his brothers with such good revenge. I mean, he could have punished them in vile, evil ways and never had to face any accountability for it. But instead, Joseph chooses generosity. In Genesis 45, verse 4, it says, Joseph said to his brothers, "Come close to me." And when they had done so, he said to them, "I'm your brother, Joseph, the one that you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now there's been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years there will be no plowing or reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance." How could Joseph muster the will to be so generous when faced with the people that hurt him so profoundly? Joseph shows us a lesson. The ancient Jewish scriptures remind us that generosity towards people that we don't like is a pathway of our own healing. Sometimes we have to become the wounded giver. The best correction of the wrong is the practice of the better. Is there someone or is there some issue that God would ask you to look again at, despite your negative feelings, despite your wound, despite your hurt? What if God's asking you to look again at that person or at that place? What if God's asking you to be loving, to be generous towards someone or something that you don't feel comfortable with today? I would suggest that this is a lot more about you getting better than them.